Okay, we're good.
Hello there.
That's weird.
Hello there. I guess close meeting over. Roll call vote.
Kathy Gilbert,
Roll call vote.
roll call.
Roll call.
I'm here.
Roll call.
Sarah Carvalho.
Here.
Dan Martush.
Here.
Michelle Newberry.
Here.
Chris Livingston.
Yes.
Okay, so Brian Bush and Mike Collier are absent.
I'm gonna get fired and you're gonna start showing up.
Okay,
You
Look really good. What do we get, 7 and 8?
7 and 8, so.
These are the towns that work. Okay, the fun sections. You can wear them if you like. Okay, access and parking. Everybody made it through this wonderful section. This is probably an easier one than maybe some others.
I
Okay,
didn't have any.
on 7.
I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? What do you got here?
Okay, B, number 3.
Mhm.
You go.
All right, so 20%. Could they do 20% and then 20% and stagger it? At what point are they able to circumvent the revision by just incrementally not exceeding that 20%? It would be like the site size is locked in at this point when the new code is adopted? Or I wonder what happens if they just kind of stagger it? Is that going to allow them to circumvent what's going on?
The way I interpreted, yes. Anything less than 20% is not gonna require an additional parking plan.
And it would be 20% at the time of the addition. Okay.
Yeah. So what it is it's so like we have some places that need to like increase their parking spaces or they need to increase their building. And so to better assist those smaller expansions, it's so that they don't have to do all as in depth as of detail as they think of the larger expansion. We can probably change that.
If
You have a wording suggestion change, past history, I can think of instances where a builder, would do that, not necessarily on parking and access, but on a development where I don't wanna do a full major, so I'm gonna do 4 minors. And it's like, okay, at this point, we're past that, you're increasing that too much, so. I mean, you could put a stipulation in there that says an expansion of up to 20%, but no more than this much of a total. Like if it's increasing the project, I'm trying to think how to say it, like only once or twice, like you could put a limit of, you can only do 20% and then it kicks into a full. If you come back with a third 20%.
I think something like that would be good, just to add just some check in there.
Okay.
And then just kind of in general,
Mhm.
this whole, there's a lot of buildings or a lot of properties along 7 Highway where there's 2 accesses. It's a drive-through in and out. So with this kind of section in general, it seems like they're going to be kind of limited to just 1 at that point, because I don't see how with those smaller frontages, you're going to be able to get 2 drives and maintain that separation. So if someone goes in and kind of redevelop that, is that going to hamstring development along 7 with a lot of those, short front yards,
Right.
2 driveways in and out as they circle the building,
Yeah.
that thing?
I think this was designed to make that happen, so that we don't have an access of every 150 feet, there's another drive access and exit. It's to create more of a one into a multiple spaces.
And
think that's-
I like that in general. I do agree with that in general. I'm just thinking for any sort of redevelopment or any sort of future development for those existing properties.
I think they're gonna have to take that into consideration, that they aren't going to be allowed another access into there.
Okay? Okay, so they might have to go down from 2 to 1 and then. it's-
Not that, no, anything that's existing stays.
Okay,
So we won't have to decrease, it's just you can't increase.
okay,
So if you already have one, so like, for instance, is it Tim Stop with Taco Bell and the liquor store and then that other, they only have one access. So they couldn't increase that access to another. It would have to be somewhere else.
okay. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, that one feeds the
Yeah.
strip center and, yeah.
Well, and the Price Chopper, so Price Chopper and those other multi-unit buildings over there, they only have one access as well, so same thing. So they would have to make accommodations for their parking and navigation on site without an additional ingress or egress.
But let's say like, so McDonald's, if they were building a new location across the street, the old one, so that, I'm thinking the way
Yeah.
that Sonic moved, relocated across the street. You know, Sonic has 2 drives typically. What's gonna happen with that old site as far as, would the new site development require, would it then have to go down to 1?
No,
Or-
because
okay.
it's existing.
Okay,
So because it's existing, it just stays.
gotcha.
Anything new wouldn't, no. What's the next one? What else has-
Huh?
You got any comments?
No.
On it? Chris? None? Where you at, Dan? Or do you have any?
Nope.
Sorry, I'm gonna cut you for some.
You're fine. I'll touch you back.
I'm one of those people, I'm sorry.
Doesn't bother me.
Which page are you on, Dan?
Number 4.
Okay.
All right, so the pedestrian amenities, number 3, C3. It talks about requiring amenities. Are there any sort of standards, minimums, or anything like that? Because, I mean, they're talking about bike racks, drinking fountains, canopies, benches, stuff like that.
Where are you at?
7-4.
Page 4.
Am I missing it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay,
It's
I'm
okay.
sorry. Thank you. Okay, let me read it. Okay, and what's your question?
So in general, all right, going with the developers trying to skirt the system,
Mm-hmm.
would throwing one bike rack randomly in the development satisfy that? Or do they need a certain amount per thing? If it's say, a large walking stretch, are they required to have benches? Or what, I guess, what triggers the inclusion of this outside of just they should?
Right.
So what are kind of the minimums, or what type of development is gonna be required for those? Because again, the developer's gonna try to do as minimal as possible.
It doesn't say.
Trying to see if it was in.
Because there is another section that talks about where bike racks
It's
and
about
stuff
1
need
to
be
4
placed.
acres right here, 1 to 4 acres. So
Okay.
that might be that's under street access, but it doesn't say anything about sidewalk.
The only minimums that I saw, or that I remember reading, were talking about bike racks.
Yes.
And where
that's all
those
I
had to be
see.
placed, but as far as some of the other amenities and stuff, all right, so they meet the minimum for the bike racks that we call out, and then everything else, I feel like they could just
Very,
ignore.
yeah. They're downtown most of the time. And they're, the one by our office is really rusty and collects.
Is it behind your office?
No, it's in front, between, Press Monkey in our office. That's what we use to collect it, driving crazy, so I take my reclaimed under and I clean up the street, and then the next day it's all wet. Put it all in the trash can.
I'm sure, that's what that got,
Is that what you did? Okay.
stalking.
Okay, I asked to clarify where,
Or how big the development has to be.
where are the standards for that?
And then on the next one, number 4,
Uh-huh.
talks about when pedestrian crossings exceed 24 feet, crosswalks or other features to identify pedestrian crossings may be required. May is always a word that makes me think, how can I avoid it then?
Correct.
So I guess just,
Yeah.
So do you want to change it from may to shall?
I would just say maybe required by the, director, or what's the phrase?
The director.
Yeah. Or would that be a public work type thing as to when that's required, and I think just getting a person in there that has the authority to say, hey, this is needed, and not leaving it to whoever's developing the site would be appropriate.
What's it maybe considered in the box, the next one?
Yeah, it says what, like, if you increase, if you have a bump out, or like how it would be considered a shorter distance.
Mhm.
Okay. Everybody in agreement with that one?
Yes.
Okay.
And then on that note, on E, on the next page, on 75,
Mhm.
throughout the whole code, there's a lot of public works director or community development director and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I guess what's kind of the check and balance on those positions? Because it seems like they have a lot of flexibility, which is great, because I do believe that's needed. But what's the check and balance in general for like conflict of interest? Like say a development's a buddy with the director or what have you, and it just, so stuff kind of slides for one development where another one might be held more in check.
Right.
And I guess that's
I
just
like
kind of a general thing.
Yeah, that's
part
gonna
of
be
the
general
program.
in the whole thing, really.
Yeah, and you know, I like having the flexibility because I don't think everything needs to go through boards and everything.
Right.
It makes it more development friendly, but I want to make sure we're not so friendly with developers that preferential
this is-
treatment is
yeah.
developing, or we're
I like that.
and I also don't want something so onerous that it's going to hamstring the
Right.
flexibility of the code.
Yeah.
But
So typically what we will do now, I mean, Tony and I are both very, and like, you are, it's the same rules across the board. That doesn't say what the next people will do in that.
Right.
So it is a good one to have it, but we will go through it together. He and I will, and Shelby too, I should say, as well as our engineers. So our engineers don't just look at the engineering side of it, they look at it compared to the development code too. So they do a full scope as well. So I think there is a little bit of a balance, but I don't know that it's actually set forth anywhere else, so.
okay.
But I mean, no,
And I guess maybe just instead of limiting it to one person making that decision, just, and again, this is kind of a broader
right,
overarching thing with code, maybe identifying two or, you know, in certain circumstances, maybe a third person that would need to be involved in that.
Tony, a lot of times he looks at it and tells them what they need to fix or whatever they need to do, and he's okay with it. And I know he always brings it to them in front of city council during closed session.
Yeah.
What do you believe in? He presents it to them so they're all on the same page if there's any questions. You know, he usually does.
yes,
Yeah, that's what I thought. So it's like, instead of having this guy go to 3 people,
Mhm.
goes to 1 person and then
Okay.
it branches from there. So.
Okay.
It won't be like
That's
Tony-
just a general
Right.
comment.
It won't be like Tony, oh yeah, go ahead and do it. And 2 months later, he's in trouble because
Yep.
he gets the okay from everybody else.
we have it internally now, but again, if any staff changes, anything can change.
Yep.
So, yeah. What's the next one?
I'm assuming it said back there under parking, or are we at parking, we're at parking now, about how many handicap spots has to be.
Handicap is determined by ADA standards.
Hold on here.
25% of the parking. If there's 10, yes, that 2.
What's What's the word behind the little yellow text box?
Single family residential.
Okay.
You guessed it, you got it. Yeah. You did pick it, you picked the word.
So the automobile wash, what counts as a parking stall? Because I'm thinking of like the one on the north end of town. I don't think there's any formal parking there, since it's just the bays that have the drive-through.
Correct. So, and I asked about this, and I don't know that I ever got an answer on it, I'll be honest with you.
Because honestly, for a business like that, I don't see parking spots being needed
Right,
unless
right.
there's a vacuum right next to
Right.
it. Because I mean.
Or those fancy ones where there's actual employees that are cleaning.
Mhm.
Well, you have to go wash, you pull out, you pull in.
Right.
One phrase.
So I'm just questioning whether or not that's needed, or,
Or shouldn't be.
Right.
because if there are full-time employees that are assisting with it, then it would have to fall under probably the
Right.
employee requirements as well,
Yes.
so.
So do we need to clarify that if it's manned or if it's,
I mean, if it's an
Wouldn't be a
unmanned
bad
business,
idea.
I wouldn't, or I don't see the need for parking for an automatic business, like the ice machine,
right,
that's no longer there. Would that have needed a parking?
Or like that one that's like the, across from Brian's house, maybe it's also assuming that there's vacuums, that they were gonna need parking for the vacuums. Maybe that's what they're assuming now.
could be.
Or like a freestanding ATM, because those are getting more popular,
Right,
you know, would that require parking?
Well, it's usually like a drive-through.
Usually a
Yeah.
drive-through, but it would probably have to break out into its own parcel or it would have to be permitted to be built, at which point what category would that fall under where no parking is required? Because everything requires at least some.
mm-hmm,
Are you talking about like the little ones where you walk into, like little,
I'm just talking about like some of the,
or you talking about the ones you just pull up to?
yeah, it's basically just like a drive-through, a regular ATM attached to a bank or under a canopy, but there's no bank associated with it.
Okay.
There's one, it's an Academy Bank, it's at like 135th and Metcalf, on the northeast corner there. There was one, I think that's gone now, over in Lee Summit in front of, or in the same shopping center with Planet Fitness and stuff like that. It was on the west side of that property. I think that they pulled that out.
Yeah, Westport and Southwest Traffic Way, there's one there, it's a building, main got sliced, so this little spot right here. And they have like for every machine, they got 2 parking spots.
Mm.
So there's 4 spots up there.
And is it a walk-up or?
Yeah, you walk, you know, you get out and you walk in
And I guess that would be the difference too, because
Yeah.
if it was a walk-up, you need the parking.
Yeah.
If it's a drive-through, it's not needed.
something like that, you only need like 2 spots for every machine. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the machines they put in there.
so to me, those types would fall under all other businesses and commercial establishments. That would be 1 per 300 square foot of floor area minimum.
So it would require at least.
So it would require at least 1 parking spot. I think I have not seen one, but I'm gonna assume they're in a parking lot with other things, and so
Typically,
they're- that's gonna be counted in there.
Okay.
So on a multi-use, you have to take into consideration every use in that area for that parcel. So for instance, the shopping center where the creamery was, there's 3 restaurants, so that maximizes, like that pretty much absorbs all of that parking lot there. And then you have an insurance agent, which is minimal use, so it doesn't require as many. So it does cover everything. It needs more, obviously. If they ever do improvements, they'll have to increase their parking there, so. Does that answer? No, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess worst case, there's always the variance process.
Right.
Well, there,
Yeah.
there's plenty of parking in front of Saddle Brand, they just don't utilize it because there's no island
Yeah,
there.
'cause
So
it's
you
no-
could park,
Yeah, you can park more there.
yeah,
You just have to stripe it or put something there to indicate, well, similar to where the laundromat is, you know, they just have those two double rows in the middle, that again are not striped, but people know they're there. So,
and you could easily back into them, back into the pool. Yeah.
all the things.
Yeah.
All the things. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
It happens a lot there.
Well, if they had a landscaping island down the middle, like is now required,
Right,
you wouldn't have that problem.
that's correct.
Just go over that.
Just
Right to that.
Yeah. Don't be sure that hurts.
Exactly. I came out of when Gerbs was where Dollar Tree is. Remember with the big ditch that used to be
Yes.
along the road? So I was in my dad's truck, his baby, and I guess I didn't leave it in gear. It was in neutral. I thought somebody stole it. I was like, that damn kid is on marker. Because I figured it was him. It did not go to the ditch, but luckily there was rubber tire and it stopped it. Because he would have killed me. It probably would have told it because that ditch was so big.
Right.
Man, I got in that thing as fast as I could before he got a phone call.
Right.
Right.
I may or may have not done that. The tree stopped it before it hit the creek. It's good.
What else you got, Dan?
All right, under maximum parking, B2,
Mm-hmm.
is that a must or a suggested thing? And I guess how often do we bump up against more parking than truly needed?
So we talked about this. And ours was the school district. So obviously, the school, the high school, needs more parking than 50% of their area. So that's an instance where you're gonna run up against that. Or if you have the event center or those types of places or where we're gonna come up against that. Those huge. Where the parking supersedes the building size.
Gotcha. Now, say for the high school then, are they required, like, let's say the high school is coming in new, like as is, brand new development, would they then be required to make their parking convertible where during the summer, when it's not gonna have as much stuff, are they gonna have to roll out playground equipment, stuff like that? To satisfy that condition, and then how do we enforce it?
I don't think it's saying you have to put playground equipment, it's saying such as playgrounds.
So this is, no use shall provide more than 50% more than minimum required parking without documented evidence of actual parking demand. So that, the high school is gonna provide us documentation that we have to have more than 50% of this because of our,
But then it goes on, and in addition, any parking permitted over 50% shall require mitigating potential impacts or more, and then puts that as the,
one. Shall, for one or more, as long as you.
I guess really though, if it's just one or more, I would just jump down to 3 and do a different material and just call it a day then.
Yeah. I mean, they can increase their open space by 10% too. So, I mean, I think there's other alternatives. I don't know that.
I mean, I'd love
I
it if
know.
someone took advantage of it.
Yeah, right. Would be great. I mean, I really think the only place that I can think of right now that's gonna have that issue is gonna be the high school.
Gotcha.
Cause I can't think of a case that would.
Would that like be part of like, the farmer's market? I mean, we use that as a dual thing, it's a
Mhm.
parking lot and it's a farmer's market.
I mean, you could have it that, I mean, you could come up with other uses besides just the playground or
That is, I think later though, it says
event
that
areas, so.
parking lot has to be a dust-free thing, so I don't know if that parking lot would actually qualify that. Because that is a dust-producing lot.
Hopefully not for very long.
Yeah, that's working on that.
Yes.
so.
So,
We put buildings on it, or are you gonna pave it?
we're gonna pay that. So, yeah, I think,
Are you gonna accidentally bump into that guy's building on there, you look at it,
what,
that he shouldn't be living in?
respectful, I know we should.
Can it be condemned? Are you living in it?
It can be condemned because he's living in it. If I have physical evidence, I can address the living situation.
He's living in it. Not one percent. Yeah.
The
yeah,
one
so that
corner.
isn't- Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think there are instances where we can, something similar to a farmer's market or a weekend market, something like that, when they're not using it in peak times, I think will be an acceptable use in that instance as well. So. What else we got? Dan, you're the only one I see that has writing on their pages.
I know.
Sorry.
It's about parking, too.
But I really didn't, I mean, I did read it, I didn't have a whole lot, but
This is why there's all of you guys reading it, because I've read it so many times at this point, yeah.
Okay, so, question I wrote under 6, and I'm trying to remember exactly why. I asked if existing sites are exempt for the deferral of parking space requirements, or is this gonna be a citywide thing? And then, this is what actually got me thinking about the whole conflict of interest of giving the,
Everybody or a person.
yeah,
So we had this discussion too with multi-studio. How do we determine what is deferred? And it's often a case by case. So for instance, if you have, you have a development that we know is gonna be multi-sites on that development and they want to do it in phases. So instead of having them put the whole parking lot in for all of the phases of the development, as they do the phases, the parking lot is there, and then at the next phase, that amount of parking comes in, and then the third phase, that amount of parking comes in.
Alright.
So it's not really deferring the number, it's deferring the installation of the parking spaces that will be required for the full development itself.
okay.
That makes sense.
Okay.
She's so good.
It's because she's hers alone.
Did that satisfy your,
Yes.
your question or not?
So I'm just rereading the paragraph.
You're
just to
okay.
see.
And it's up to you guys to determine too, like it really is, like if they wanna say, hey, this is our phase development, we don't wanna put all of the parking spaces in, it comes to you and city council for approval of that determination. We can make this, it's just like anything else, we make a suggestion to you, but in the end, you guys are the determining body, or the decision-making body. And it can't be, I mean, so it says in there, the area reserved for future parking shall be brought to finished grade and shall be landscaped. So it can't just be leftover dirt from the existing, it has to be at finished grade and landscaped, which is gonna be grass, essentially.
All right, E, any shared parking arrangement shall require an agreement among all landowners participating in the agreement to ensure access, joint use, maintenance, and other operational issues. What happens if one of the landowners just decides not to be part of the agreement?
So then it wouldn't be an approved shared parking. So they all have to be in agreement, or it can't be considered shared parking.
Okay,
And it would have to be similar to, I hate to say HOA, but like that, where it's a binding document for the properties and not the owners. So it's filed with the county that this is a shared use agreement and this is where it's gonna.
And then we won't keep, it's all at the county level.
Yes, it will be filed with the county and then that awaits their a legal document, not just, hey, we're gonna do this.
Gotcha.
Because if Kathy owns property and her and Sarah have an agreement and then Sarah sells, and the next guy's like, I don't wanna have anything to do with you. So,
It's in the title
Yeah.
That's what you need.
yes.
Because just the phrasing of it, among all landowners participating in the agreement, just
Mhm.
makes it sound like it's almost optional
Right.
to participate in it.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Like, I'm going to assume there's probably one on file between the gas station and the strip mall over there. I don't know, I wasn't here when I was here, but I was not here when I was done.
For the bicycle parking,
Mm-hmm.
is there a way that we can offer a deferral if something falls into this category, but really it just doesn't make sense to have this much, like that much bicycle parking? I know it kind of goes against what I was asking earlier,
Right.
but I guess one thing that bugs me is when I drive through a city and I see frivolous kind of buildings and landscaping and stuff that really no one's gonna partake in or do anything with just because it was required by the code, but not needed. And I guess I wouldn't object to offering a deferral of that just to prevent unnecessary building. What I'm thinking of, and this might be maybe a more extreme example, but along 135th through Leewood, you'll have all these beautiful ornate decorations on the corner and then farmland all behind it. Because as they were developing it, they required all of that stuff, but then nothing really happened there. So I don't mind having those minimum requirements, but I also don't mind offering a deferral of those just when it's not needed.
Okay. Maybe as approved by,
I wanna add the, service.
And you could probably just copy the same deferral thing as the parking
Right.
lot. Because I don't know what the zoning is all up and down the Katy Trail as well, but it sounds like anything within 1,000 feet, if it's zoned commercial, it's gonna require parking there, and, you know, auto repair shop is considered commercial, so
Right.
do they need bike parking out in front of them?
I say no, I mean, if it's an auto repair business and you're gonna bring your bike in there?
if they have air or breathe.
Yeah.
So, I'm just thinking that, I don't wanna take the
Right.
requirements out, but,
But maybe allow for,
you know, a little bit of reason, common sense of, okay, this really doesn't make sense.
Right.
It's true, it's commercial, but
Yeah.
who's gonna take their bike there and stop?
and maybe it's, again, like you said,
Yeah.
it's like the deferral of the parking spaces.
Because I mean, if other stuff develops around it and more bike, I don't say bike friendly type commercial retail, then yeah, that would make sense to bring those things up to that standard at that point.
Okay. I'll write it up. Just getting lots of data.
I jumped to 13 now.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I don't think anybody else has comments, Dan. I think it's just. Did you?
I really didn't this time around.
It's okay.
I felt bad. I was like, gosh, I need to write something.
Dan lives in a lot of cities and is in a lot of cities, so he knows where these things are.
So the landscape, are we at landscape?
Yeah, that's where I can do. Okay, so number 5, the screening, hedge walls, stuff like this. I always bang my head up against walls when I see these, because inevitably a sign will get buried in that landscaping. You can't see the business. And I don't know if there's an exception that we can make for like a clear space around that sign. I know we're supposed to have landscaping around it, but we don't need a continuous hedge or blocking landscape along the entirety of the frontage.
Correct me if I'm wrong, didn't the codes officer, when he's driving around, he checks to make sure, and if there's any complaints about something being blocked, like a Whistle Car Wash. You know, for a while, we had problems with bushes he put out, started blocking it. I think our guy went to him and said, hey, you're gonna clear this out, it's getting to be a hazard. You know, so kind of need that up.
But there's also a minimum height requirement on the hedge too, so you're gonna have that, and I think that might be the next section of landscaping.
Yeah.
But, we've got a minimum that's causing obstruction. What's gonna take precedence, the obstruction of the thing or the minimum requirement of the hedge?
I think it's obstruction, you just, take it out, say, hey, this is too dangerous.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And maybe it can be addressed in the sign code later as far as making sure that the base for the sign is above that minimum hedge height, so that way we don't get that blending, but.
So this says it can't be above 4 feet. If we don't maintain our landscaping, which is what Chris was getting at, that if it's overgrown, we are gonna send them a letter and say, hey, trim the bushes, cut your grass, whatever, the same we always do.
But what if it is well maintained
And it's over,
and it's,
I think we still,
It's obstruction, though.
yeah, it's still
Yeah.
obstruction, we still force them to take it down. Even if-
Oh, the
I
sign?
think, yeah, no, it's not the sign, but the bushes, that they're growing, you know, so, I think they, in the past, like, with Whistle, he had the regular sign, no big deal, and Ross came in with that sign.
Oh.
Okay, hold on a second, you gotta back it up. So he was able to move back a little bit. But that was, it was a while before they had a street light put in too.
I think it's missing something. I think it's missing a word. I think it's supposed to be any parking otherwise permitted within 15 feet of any right of way or residential district shall be screened with a continuous hedge or decorative fence. But I don't know why why we would want a hedge along a right of way either.
Right. Do you think that's just more for residential neighborhoods?
Yeah, like it's a screening.
Right.
Yeah.
Like along a highway when houses back up to it.
Yes.
You know, it
So
kind
like
of,
behind McDonald's or behind Casey's or any of those, they're all supposed to, we already require a screening anyway right now. Right now it requires a screen and a buffer yard. So screening has to be a solid opaque fence and then a buffer yard depending on how wide it is, on how close your plantings are. So I don't know why we would want it along a right of way.
but then we're also capping it at 4 feet.
Correct.
Are we then not creating that screen that we want by only putting it just high? If we're trying to screen and really camouflage that transition of the zoning, or that zone transition, is 4 feet gonna do it?
I don't know the answer to this. Right?
Yep.
That's my job.
You can go.
We're done with comments.
Easy.
Okay, I will find out. I don't have an answer.
I just wanna make sure that it's not so rigid in the fact that,
Right.
you know, there's not, if it is intended to be along the right of way, which later in the landscaping, it does talk about needing the trees and the sharp
Right.
and stuff like that, then I wanna make sure that, I've seen a lot of cities go so aggressive with the landscaping that you can't see the buildings, you can't see the business,
Right.
and that just drives me nuts, because that's not business friendly to me.
Right.
You know, you have a highway going straight through the hot town,
Right.
so let's try to get those people stopping.
Which is where most of our commercial is. What else you got?
I didn't check, but all of the zoning classifications are represented in that district chart, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's in the chart.
Except we do need to remove ours. And if we remove that district.
All right, last one, I'm on 16.
Okay.
All right. What if you have 4,999 square feet of floor area?
It doesn't qualify,
Okay.
so it's up to you. I mean, we can obviously take that down. So this one is for off-street loading,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. So it'll be like Guido's Wood doesn't have one.
They need one, they have stuff delivered.
Yeah. So it depends on if you want to require a loading space for all commercial, regardless of size.
It's not saying loading dock, it's just saying a space.
Loading
for it.
spaces.
Yeah.
I don't know, Dollar General even has what you would consider a loading space.
They do, but by the building, yeah, back
On the
side,
north
next to the
side,
north
yeah.
side, the old building, I don't know about them, assuming the new one's the same way.
No, the old one is all parking spaces. They're
Yeah,
all
that's
line
like they
parking
use-
spaces on the side, they don't actually have any loading space.
So
They just-
they back up there.
Yeah, they back up and
Oh,
block
that's right, yeah.
the spaces, which is fine, but the one on the north end of town does, they do not have parking on the side of the building, so that we can consider loading. Is that loading space?
Dollar to leave, they have it, they're there at 6 o'clock waiting.
Who?
The dollar, the trucks with Dollar General.
You obviously don't know in the evening.
No.
There's always a truck in there, all throughout the day, they've got different trucks.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I pulled in the other day, there's 3 of them sitting
Really?
outside the market.
Yeah, and the
Say?
Let's go.
between Pepsi and liquor and,
There's all
Dollar General,
ones
yeah.
too.
Semi blocks downtown for about 30 to 45 minutes every Tuesday. Yeah, for the pool hall and for the other,
Oh, for
for
liquor.
Green Hills and, yeah, the liquor. And then on Wednesday, another truck comes, and blocks everything.
Just take it.
so.
So do you think it's necessary for
It's-
less
I know
than?
the beer-
I'm trying to think where we have less than 4,000 square, well, Sonic, for instance, it doesn't.
Back to space.
Yes. Sonic wouldn't, doesn't have one, McDonald's doesn't have one, Casey's doesn't have one, the new gas station, I don't think, let's go with the ones that do have one. Dollar General, the hardware store, and Price Chopper, I think are the only ones that have designated loading areas.
So then I guess the question is 5,000 too small then? Is it more maybe like 10,000 that if it's less than that, they don't need one? I guess what's more appropriate for what we have and moving forward, how we progress?
Yeah.
Don't know.
I don't know,
5,000 is not a very big building,
Yeah, it's not.
not at all.
no,
Your house is 6.
No, it's not. Far from it.
so. That's up to you guys, we can increase it, we can decrease it, and I'm assuming we're just strictly looking at, the restaurant, the first one, the floor area.
Yeah, except.
Yeah.
I think the rest of them are all pretty,
Mhm.
I mean, obviously you're gonna want one for, the funeral home needs to have one. regardless of size, if you ask me.
I'm fine with keeping it as is. It was just kind of a
Yeah.
general, usually when I see charts
Uh-huh.
like that, my next thought is, well, what if I'm smaller than that?
Right,
You know, what then?
yeah,
But if they're not required and it feels appropriate, then yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have an issue. Because I mean, would every, you know, if you wanted to tack on a building on First Street there,
right. Then it would, if it was over 5,000 square feet,
then that would
then
require.
it would require a loading area.
Yeah, and I don't think there's room or space for
Yeah.
it in ever to
Right.
get one in, so I think that'd just be too restrictive, so. Yeah, I'm fine with it. as
Okay.
is.
We're not gonna do that later on the couch, but we'll do
Oh,
this.
my God.
Did everybody make it through? All right, who has comments on 8? Anybody?
All right.
We know Dan does.
Come on, Dan, just little
It's fine.
No, we're messing with you.
All right, A3, so the plant requirements.
8-3.
Okay.
So the plant requirements,
Uh-huh.
are things like overhead lines gonna be taken into account, the overhang into the street, stuff like that? Because again, just driving around, you'll either see trees that are hollowed out to around the power lines, which look terrible,
Right.
or, you know, trees will start overgrowing onto the state route,
Mhm.
and then the state doesn't like that.
So I can tell you with the state, we tried to get the library to actually put trees along 7 Highway, and they're like, no, they won't even allow trees in the right. You could put bushes there, you could put flowering whatever's in there, but you cannot put a tree in the state right away. They won't permit it. So we send, everything goes to MoDOT. Every site plan that comes in goes to MoDOT for review, so they automatically kick it back on.
It's Henry.
Sorry, not
Hey,
Hi, Henry.
hey,
So
how you doing?
Pretty good, how are you guys?
So how
now,
does,
the other one to take into consideration is in your residential areas. And how do you want that to look and flow?
in residential, I don't mind the overgrowth,
Right.
I think it adds a nice
Yeah.
charm to it.
Mhm.
How is the code gonna rectify against MoDOT kicking something back? Does MoDOT supersede
Yes.
our code? Okay,
Yes. Unfortunately, it does.
gotcha.
So, for instance, with the library, they needed to plant so many trees, and so they had to plant them also a lot outside of the MoDOT right away,
Gotcha.
which actually comes down Cedar Street to their entrance. So, it's a little crazy. But
We can clean the back. They're a lot in the back.
yeah. So they planted smaller type trees closer to the building.
Gotcha.
At one time, it said, when we were going through this several years ago, it said, what tree would be appropriate for this type of area too? And kind of left it up to the developer.
We have certain ones that are considered, I can't plant, I'm gonna have to repair because they're like invasive, like invasive species. Those types that we do have a list of, these are not acceptable tree. And some of them will say if they're a deciduous tree or a shade tree, those kinds of things are all specified. I don't know if they are, yeah, like this one here says evergreens. Evergreens can be substituted for shade trees, that kind of stuff.
I knew we did
So,
something.
yeah.
Because back then, the repairs were all right, but we were like,
I don't know about all
Mhm.
these trees around these parking spaces.
Right.
Because
you
they
don't
end
want a
up,
big old
they end
maple.
up falling on your tree, on your car.
Yeah.
But that's what that's drawn up, like, with all the trees around
Or like the ones that drop fruit or whatever, you know, the little grape, whatever you call it, stain and thing. So kind of left it up to the developer to make the decision on what he wanted to put.
That's a lot of trees to go on there.
And I guess how do these requirements kind of compare to some of the other cities? Because I mean, I think one tree for 5 parking spaces seems
A lot.
like a lot. But again, if they can go anywhere on the property,
Yeah.
I guess that's the
The
cap.
landscape area on the exterior edge or interior parking lot plants are used to soften the appearance. So they could put the trees elsewhere and then go down to the shrubs, put the shrubs and the grasses in the parking areas and put the trees elsewhere on the property. Or around the edges of the parking, that kind of stuff.
And it says 2-for-1 on ornamental trees.
Yeah.
Where it says you could put 2-for-1 up to 50% of the shade trees
Yes.
for ornamental trees.
So we put the limit at 50% because we didn't want everybody going, well, I need 10 shade trees, so I'm gonna do 20 ornamental trees instead.
Yeah.
Like, no, we're not doing that. You can put half of them as ornamentals or evergreens, but the other half have to be shade trees.
And when we're looking at these, are we looking at kind of the matured height of the tree on average?
Measure the width
I
of
think
the caliber.
I think it's a 3-inch base, isn't it?
It's 1.5 caliber. I
Oh,
don't
it's
know what that converts to. Or 2.5 on a large tree.
So I've seen blue shopping centers go in and, you know, they have the nice little saplings, they're smaller trees. Business looks good, everything looks good, and then it just starts getting overgrown. You lose the
Right.
building and then just lose that drive-by traffic of people stopping in and going to your business, because they can't find you, don't see you.
Well, we've got root problems, the trees get bigger and the roots come out.
2.5 caliper is 2.5 inches measured at 6 inches above the soil level. That's not very big.
Calipers this. Not around. Calipers
It
across.
says a tree with a trunk diameter of 2.5 inches.
Oh, good night.
You do the same, sir. Behave yourself.
I'll work on it.
Oh, no, go stir up some trouble, will you?
I'm thinking it makes a caliper tool, you know, we measure it out
Yeah,
around.
it's around. It's not very big.
You know.
I mean, I don't mind landscaping, I like it, but I also I wanna make sure that as things are getting reviewed from the landscaping perspective, it's not looking at it at the time of planting, but also thinking in 5,
In the
10,
future.
15 years, what's that gonna look like, because like it or not, plants are gonna die, they're not gonna get maintained, stuff like that, and it's a fine balance, because if you get so planned in the landscaping, when it starts to fall apart, it looks shoddy compared to being a little more sparse and a little more natural
Right.
looking, that when stuff kind of dies off or gets hit by the plow or whatever, it's not gonna look out of place when it's gone. Or the buildings are completely surrounded in trees and you can't see anything. I don't know if that's something that can really be addressed by the code outside of just,
I'm just glad somebody mowed where the strip center, where the laundromat is, finally,
Yeah, no.
because it's 2 foot tall.
He did it today, when I went out at 9 o'clock, it was unmowed, and when I came back, it was mowed, so.
If I was renting there, I'd be really mad.
I'm the National Water Service mowed today.
Oh, gosh, that's so long. Did you do the sidewalks?
Huh?
Did you do the sidewalks?
I don't know why they didn't mow,
I don't know.
well, they didn't,
We usually do, that's the odd part.
Sidewalks are good,
They do.
though.
It's ever
I didn't even, that thing.
so I think it depends on what type of, where the location is, as to what, because like the location, it tells you where everything can go.
I was too smooth burning to really picture all that stuff and where everything's gonna go. So
Right,
it's just more of a
yeah.
general comment,
Just to make sure that it's not,
as staff or whatever board is reviewing the plans, that just
right,
try to,
Put some common sense in it,
Yeah.
instead of just, this is what it's gotta be.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because it comes down to a matter of taste at that point too. I mean, that's my personal taste and,
I mean, the existing Price Chopper has no island plantings, because it was before you guys required it.
Yeah.
Actually, those all are cars, right?
Yeah.
It is.
You cannot have an animal parking there.
I was at an event in Overland Park and, the tree fell on one of my coworkers' cars while we were in there. It wasn't even that big. It was just,
Pretty big.
I went, the wind blew it, or I don't know.
One is right there.
It was a Bradford there.
Right there.
Yeah.
That's a-
Those things are terrible.
I know.
Oh, yeah, front yard, and I chop her down.
He didn't tell the state because okay.
Oh, I got my tree already.
Okay.
It was like this big. It died. I planted it, and 2 weeks later it was dead.
Oh, the
So,
squirrels have planted some really nice walnut trees in my house. I put
Oh, yeah.
one in a little bucket to see if I could get it to grow. I don't know, the walnut tree.
What you got, Dan?
Jumping to
Pictures.
8-7. I couldn't figure it out. How do I determine which is it? I'm developing something, how do I determine if I'm type 1, 2, or 3?
Your blood test.
So,
I was just trying to figure out where that cross-reference was to,
I think this goes back to similar to like a buffer yard. So if you're a type C buffer yard, if you're 10 feet, they're more condensed. If you're 15 feet, they're a little wider apart. And if they're 20 feet or 40 feet, they're even more sparse, like
Okay,
farther
right.
apart. So it depends on if you have a 5-foot perimeter, 15 foot, or 20 foot.
okay.
So that's how,
So
whatever
class-
you decide to do is how that classification is.
Okay.
made.
Yeah, according to page 8, my neighbor should have never been able to install the wall that sits behind my house.
Nothing.
Not at this point. It's there. Oh, it's woody and nasty corrugated metal. You should drive by and look at
Okay, so on
So
that
this is
point-
for, mostly for commercial.
it. Yeah.
So on that point, referencing the buffer yards,
Mm-hmm.
we have a 8-foot perimeter buffer
Where,
on 7-12, looking at that chart there.
well, we're already done, so.
about reference back, back forward,
Well, I was looking for the reference, and I
right?
got an answer, so I had to verify.
Be an engineer.
Maybe. Okay, page 712, where are we
Yeah,
looking at?
so just looking at the chart up at the top, 7-8.
Mm-hmm,
So like under 20 to 49 spaces per block, an 8-foot perimeter buffer.
mm-hmm.
So would they jump into the 15-foot requirements? Or with the 5, or
They
did we
probably
just
ought
have
to match it.
inconsistency?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can think of
right.
it.
Okay. Because if you look at the side, we have 8, 10, and 12.
Yeah.
You know, here it's 5, 15,
5,
20.
15, and 20.
$100 to $199 has a 20-foot front setback buffer.
So I think these are different, I think these are your,
I didn't think of that.
This is the perimeter parking requirements. This is the parking lot.
yeah, so these are your planting requirements. So if they're similar to, so if you're doing a 15-foot perimeter planting, this is what you need. It's not really a buffer, so this is the buffer for, the buffer in table 7-8 is actually the buffer size that you have to have. This is just your perimeter plantings is required by the parking, is if you're a 5-foot perimeter planting or 15-foot or 20-foot. So it's not really a buffer, it's just that's what your perimeter planting sizes are, similar to a current buffer yard that we
So
have.
how do I know which one is gonna be applicable to me if I'm developing a site then.
So it's up to you to decide how much landscaping you want to put and how wide you want your perimeter planning to be.
Gotcha.
So it's your decision, do you want to put all of these, one shrub per 2.5 feet, or do you want to do, any combination of shrubs? One large tree for 60 feet
Gotcha.
with no
Okay.
minimum
So it's
requirements.
not something the code is dictating. It's
Correct.
something
It's something that you can decide if you want to do more plantings with a smaller perimeter planting, or do you want to do less plantings with a wider perimeter planting?
Gotcha.
Let her with the planning, she okay.
Slip her $100 and she'll do whatever you want.
No, she won't, not for $100. Nope,
That's how you gonna do it.
this one can't be bought.
Alright, 8A,
Awesome.
the front fence to be limited to no more than 4 feet. When it says front, is it the face of the fence that faces the front of the yard? Or does it need to be in front of the building?
It's in front of the building.
Okay, so if it's on the side of the building, that you do,
Uh-huh.
they're not limited to that 4 feet?
Correct.
Okay.
So similar to like what we have now, yes.
Yeah, that. Reading.
That's it. Well, we're shoving read 9, so we can't go to 9.
She's
like,
And-
Pretty good.
I asked her before.
Yeah, we're gonna be like,
It's
sign this
nice.
Signs is a lot.
We've been to it like 3 times.
3, I thought it was 5, so.
I think we got her pretty close.
Okay.
If you think I ask a lot of questions now, this is my $100.
All right, I will
This is
come
his
prepared.
delicacy there.
This is the reason he was brought in. so.
Yes.
Okay.
So next time we'll do 9 and 10 and go over, these comments that they sent back, so read through them, and I tried to reference like what section our comment was on and what it was. So if you have any questions, let me know on that portion. But otherwise, we'll just go through their comments and then 9 and 10.
So if it's struck through, does that mean that
That
section
means
been removed?
that's what they corrected. So we said table 1 order, so we asked them to
gotcha.
order the table differently, so that means that they corrected that.
Okay,
So, yeah. If there's, on the second page, some of them have comment, like notes. And then the page after that will say like what the notes are,
okay.
what their comment back was. It doesn't have a red strike through. So,
I expect you to read that too. Okay. Like you always pick your dead non book?
okay, so.
Isaiah. As soon as he dismisses us.
Let's, back to this. Are we good? Everybody need just June for 9 and 10?
Yeah.
Okay.
We
and
don't
then-
have anything on
No, we don't have anything on it yet, so, our deadline is pretty much passed.
Yeah.
Usually it's this time it has to be received and complete to be on the next agenda, so, right now it'll be nothing but a work session. July is, it's gonna be, it's not during the fair, but I don't know that it's not.
So it'll be June 3rd is our next meeting?
Yes,
Nope. I'm gonna be babysitting my son's dog.
so July will actually be July 1st. So, just think about if, and we can decide at the next meeting, look at your schedules and make sure everybody's available that day with 4th of July being on Friday. I know people plan vacations and such. We can always move it.
Now, I will be gone August 5th.
Okay,
Or maybe not.
my intent is to, if we get through everything in June, is to have multi-studio at our July meeting. To go over, to have all the comments back and go over anything we still have questions on, and just to go through it, what the next steps are after that, so that we can hopefully have a final draft by our August meeting to prepare and send to city council. So we don't hold me to those dates.
So will they go clear through this like we did?
I don't think that's their intent. I think their intent is that we went through it all and are happy with it, and they're gonna say yes or no. They may review it, I don't know. But I think their intent is just to go with the recommendation.
That's how I understood it.
It's in our hands, y'all.
So,
Because they have it, they have the whole thing too.
yes, the meeting after I gave it to you, I gave it to them.
Right.
So they have it. So just think about that July 1st meeting, make sure everybody's schedules are clear. I will be here, so. I'll be here, but we can discuss it in June if we need.
He's gonna make sure he's
Just
gonna be here
kidding.
early. We might as well bring in pizza and beer for that one.
Right.
Well, Brian had a lot of questions too. So
Yeah,
Brian had a lot of concerns.
yeah. So I know he was very detailed on it because he did the last one and was not satisfied with that one, so. Yeah. All right, well, if nothing else, I just need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn? I need a motion.
I move
Oh,
to-
he knows.
I motion to adjourn.
Nancy second, Daniel third. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. How do you do?